he don't recall, but we was all building a house. And that's how it got started. And they had to go get permission from the priest. All this is right down to the T, brother. They were talking, and the list here in the back here, the captains, I called Gwen, and I can tell you that all of those, and it did split. Your grandpa and them split. The years I'm telling you, I was running. And it split with Slim Vizina. I had split one time before, then they come back. Then they came back. In 1977, I became the captain. And they was with us. And I don't ever recall him splitting after that. And then in 81, I got a job in 79 with Crawford and Company. Well, in 1980, I got to come back, and I ran. 1981, I was working in California. And I go to my supervisor, I said, hey, I want to take off that Sunday, I'm going back home for Mardi Gras. He looks at me like, man, I don't know what you're talking about. But I mean, them people don't know. Don't even know the tradition. So he said, you got one choice. You can go, but don't come back. And in 1979, when I went to work with Crawford and Company, you can look this back up. I went to work Hurricane Frederick. That was my beginning as an adjuster. In 1979, in 6 months, I made $70,000. That was a lot of money. We was working here making $5, $6 an hour, maybe $10. Well, this was like a God sent heaven to me. And in 1981, 82, I got on permanent. But I had really worked hard. I mean, and I'll be honest, I didn't graduate from high school. I didn't do none of that. And then I came back in 82, and then in 83, I was in Illinois. And I tell my boss I want to come back. Same thing. You can go, but we don't know when we're going to ever need you again. Kind of put you in a position.
Yeah.
Huh?
Sure does.
So
Sure does.
I called the guys and I said, I can't come. So y'all pick somebody. And this is the way it normally rotated. Like I was Slim Vizina back captain. And that's the way I became captain. Slim Vizina didn't show up. And I became captain. Gwen Hebert was back captain with me. So when I left, I guess your papa, Herbert, they give it to him. And then Mike Carrier was a back captain with Gwen Hebert. That's what I was told. I was not here. But I know at one time Mike Carrier was a captain with me, maybe in the middle. And they rotated it back that way somehow. And I can't tell you right from wrong from that time on.
Right.
All I can tell you, I called Gwen Hebert yesterday, and I want to know if he knew the time he was captain and about Mike Carrier, because I didn't know after mine. And the one that gave me your papa's was Fred Ryder gave me that today. He said Herbert Ryder was the captain in 1983. So I went from there, and then Gwen told me he gave it to Dwayne in 04 when he left. So it really would have been like 05. Some said Dwayne had it 1 year, some said 2 years. I don't know. So we kind of put it right here. I just put it like that. Now Marcus made a comment on it later. This is kind of right, but not right. But I can guarantee you up to 82 is right.
Right. Yeah, I'm trying to think of when.
And I'm telling you how it started back, and that that's the key issue. How did it come back? And it came back. Not just my dad and Amson Dizatel. went talked to Father Bill Van Stratton. And Father Bill Van Stratton, all I recall him saying, I will get back with y'all. I guess they looked up that thing about that fight. And he called them in. I remember that because we was living in that house right there where, well, you know where it used to live, huh? Maybe you don't. You know where Troy Moe lived? I was raised right across the street.
Oh, okay.
I was 11 years old, we moved in that house. That same house. But that house caught on fire. But I lived right there, and Bill Van Stratton got a hold of them. And my dad and Amson Digital said, okay, they guaranteed they weren't gonna have no problem. And then they went to talk to Mr. Hebert. I remember that very well. And Mr. Hebert told him in French, you know, that he would like to, but since all the problem, he'd prefer not to. I don't want no conflict. And I, you know, at that time, I didn't know what the conflict was. I really didn't.
Right.
And I guess the conflict was between, because if you go back and look at that book, it says Sonnier and Ryder. But it starts from Billy Zah. You know who Billy Zah was? Billy Zah was my daddy's grandfather. And I never even knew my own grandfather because he was dead. He died before my daddy married.
Really?
Yeah. So I mean, what do I know about that? Nothing. But it goes way back, you know. And we was kind of talking about that this morning. You know, if we stop and think, you know, for years in this town, it was the manuals. People didn't like manuals. And people didn't like the reads. But didn't know why. I never knew. Me and DC always got along. And DC's mama, oh, she was my catechism teacher. I'd go to her house. I loved that old lady to death. I worked for her. She'd never hire nobody else but me to go work for her house. And DC Reed too. But there was always a friction with people for what? I don't know what. The same thing with the riders. I see that. The manuals. And I asked the man guy, because in 1975, I was stranded in Houston, Texas. And I didn't have enough money to go rent a motel. Didn't have a job. I was going through a real bad divorce. And I went to Emmanuel's house that lives here, Galston Manuel. Knocked on the door, and everybody told me, go to his house. He opened that door. I stayed at his house for 6 months or better. Never had to pay a penny. You know, and I always wondered, what was the friction? Don't know. You know what it goes back to? Way back when Billy Zah, and that would have been Cardinal's grandpa's, the rider. That would have been that time. We don't know if they stole a damn chicken or a pig, because that all happened at that time. You know, and it's really ridiculous to bring it back this far back.
Right.
Where's Mr. Clan Emmanuel?
How are you, sir?
Good.
Freezing to death.
But I think this is a good little history thing for you.
Sure is.
But that's how it started back. And when Mr. Hebert said he wouldn't be captain, he did tell him I wouldn't be a Sonnier. And he said, Amson, since y'all all together, he said, get somebody kind of neutral. And they went ask Mr. Alvin Young. And I tell you right there, where I right down to that's where he stopped, at Garcia's. He said, I had enough. He was already drunk, and he said, that's it, no more.
And going back to the book, there's really no really agreed on time when people started running Mardi Gras in Oberlin, before this split ever happened.
No. Well, they started running in Billy Zah's time. It did say that.
Okay.
If you look at the book, it'll say that. Now, Billy Zah's time would have been, well, I guess 100 years ago. That's the book's based on 100 years.
Right. So tell me a little bit about your time as the captain.
My time as a captain, I became captain in '77. That's when I became the captain. And the way I became captain was, we didn't start at Don Fontenot, we started at Arlington Manuals. And Slim Visa and I was supposed to be captain. And I had been his back captain. And what happened was, Slim Visa and I did not show up. So we all got ready, he's no captain. So they all agreed, said, okay, since you've been the captain, you move to the front. And I became captain, and I talked a little bit, and I told them, I said, we're all friends here, some family, but I'm gonna tell you, when I get on that horse today, I have no daddy, I have no brother, I have no friend. It's strictly a job to do and have a good time. And also my philosophy is like baseball. 3 strikes you're out and there's no foul play. And I don't care if it's my brother, my daddy, or who it is, got to go. And I can tell you that in 1978, I was captain, and my dad and Mr. Cardon Ryder telling all the guys, you know, and they had been captains, and they were older men, and you respect an elderly. But I said, so the guys were coming to me and telling me, you know, Mr. Cardon told me this, your dad, Simon told me this here, Mr. Dado said this, Mr. Dado. I said, guys, I'm going to tell y'all how we stop at Gwen A. Bear's for the lunch. I will straighten it up. You can't straighten things up in the middle of the road unless you have a stop. So we stopped at Gwen A. Bear, we all had lunch. They drank their beer, everybody getting ready. I got on the mic and I said, I want to let y'all know what I told y'all this morning still stands today. And I looked at my dad and I said, today you're not my dad. So I'm going to tell you right now, you don't give orders to none of these guys. You're going to run like everybody else. And I looked at Mr. Cardon and I said, the same thing applies to you, to Mr. Adam Ryder. And I said, and if y'all don't like that, what I'm telling you, y'all can go home today. And my daddy bowled up and said, well, I'm driving the tractor and this is my tractor. And I said, you can unhook your tractor and you can go with your tractor. Because it's not changing. You're going to follow the rules or you go. So make up your mind. My mind's made up. So sit on that tractor and drive and be quiet. Now, Mr. Cardon, you sit on that wagon, play your little accordion and be real quiet and pay attention. And everybody gave me a big round of applause and they never gave me no more trouble. I never had another crossword with them. They never said a word. And the thing lasted till till my job thing. You know. And I can honestly tell you, being a captain is not an easy job. You're not going to please everybody. And there ain't no way. And the law has changed a lot today. And I think when we had the split, let's go back to the split, because I think that's a good thing to go back. At one time, the African American came into town too, from Swallow. And the agreements we had with them, we went to sit down and talk with them. Now I went with that. Mr. Lisa Caesar, Mr. Caesar. And the agreement was whoever got closer to town would be the first one in town. At that time, we didn't have no cell phone. So what they had was messenger people come back and forth. And they lined it up with Mr. Noak Manuel and Clanny Manuel. But Clanny, I think, might have been running. But what they did do was, when they got close enough, Mr. Manuel would come tell us, all right, this is where they're at, how far are you going to be by this time? And at one time we staged at Joe Skaggs in that barn behind Ronnie Moe's house. And they come through town, and then when they started coming through town and we left from the barn, we got to the cotton gin. And then when they came out of town, then we went on in town. And when Mr. Ryder had his group, we did the same thing. 1 year, one came in first, the other came in first. It wasn't who was first and who wasn't. It was who got to town without having trouble. The whole thing was not to have a problem. And I think that's what it should be today. I don't think it's a time set, well, I'm the one and I'm the one. I think it should be a mutual agreement between the two men to sit down and talk face to face and shake hands.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about the magazine group that came in from Dallas.
Okay, the magazine from Dallas. The magazine the magazine guys, they had come through Lake Charles and they were going to Alexandria. And they stopped at Mr. L.C. Vizanal's bar. And they come in there, and I can't say if they drank a beer or not, but they were talking about they were going to Alexandria for the Mardi Gras. Then from Alexandria, they were going to go to Ville Platte and Mammoth. And they asked some directions. And a couple of guys, my dad was one guy, but I don't know who else was there, said, well, you don't need to go that far, man. We're going to have one right here. We'll have a country Mardi Gras. Said, you're not going to see country Mardi Gras over there. And he asked what that was. They told him on horseback and a wagon. So they kind of agreed, and they came over, and they stayed all night at my dad's house in the outdoor kitchen. Then the next morning they followed, and they started lighting it all up, and they videoed the thing and rode the whole thing, but they rode the whole way to Oberlin with us. They never left. But they were really going for another place. That's how it happened.
So, tell me a little bit about the run here in Oberlin. How is it different from? Obviously different from New Orleans and Lake Charles and Lafayette, but Mamou, Basile, places like that.
I think the run in Oberlin, it has always been out in the country. And it's completely different from Lake Charles or New Orleans, because New Orleans and Lake Charles is all on floats. And over here was always been on horseback and wagons. And they even had some little soldiers with the little horses. And the tradition here was to always, the captain would go to the house and everybody held back. And he would ask the people, would you like to have the Mardi Gras over? And they either said, if they said yes, the captain drops his flag and they come. They're supposed to dance for them. Then he gives them a chicken. Some gave sausage, some gave rice. Some gave money. Then after they do the dance, they all got back on their horse and they go to the next ride. And for the first 1982, we didn't throw beads. There was no beads. The beads came later, you know. So we never had that. But the thing was, everybody would dress as a Mardi Gras in a costume. And they asked them to all have capuchons. And at first, everybody had one. The only one that didn't have it was a man that was dressed like a black man, and a man dressed like a black woman. And the first two in 1966 was me and Rogers Monto. And I ran that for 3 years. But it's a complete different thing. It's more of the tradition that comes back from Canada and France. That's where it comes from. It's the Canadian Mardi Gras.
So tell me a little bit about the costumes. The costumes themselves, the masks, what people wear on their heads.
Well, on their head was normally a capuchon, which was looked like a comb decorated with cloth. And some of them had masks. Years ago, they had screen masks. It was a screen mask decorated, painted. Then they had an outfit made over the other clothes with different colors, hanging pieces of threads or cloths cut. You know, it was whatever your wife would make for you. And a lot of it was made out of rice feed sacks at that time. That's the way it really started. That's the kind of cloth they use.
Let's see. What the phone call?
That's all right, I'll catch it.
So, do you have any stories from your years as the captain? Any interesting stories that people may be interested in?
What was your question?
Any interesting stories from your years of either as a captain or running Mardi Gras?
If I had a very good time running with Rogers Monto as a couple. And then when I ran, not being a couple, I enjoyed myself very much. I was very terrible about drinking and getting drunk and cut up a lot. And then when I became captain, I took some input from everybody. I wanted input, you know, what was I doing right or what was I doing wrong or how could I make it better? I thought that was a good thing to have. And then you got to filter out some of it because some of them are going to say the same thing over and over. But you get a certain group of guys that have been running together a long time and you normally use the elderly person's idea. Like one person I would lean on for his ideas was Mr. Amson Digital. And I leaned on Mr. Cardinal Ryder, what his input would be, you know. And I also took input from older guys that say, well, you know, if you do this or if you do that. And I would take it all into consideration and I'd make up my own mind. I just wanted it to be good for everybody. You know, I wanted us to all have a good time. Because being a captain, you're not a guy out there having the best time of your life. Because you're trying to control other people and you're trying to be fair at the same time equal with everybody. And you're not going to please them all. But you got to have rules and you're going to have to set your time and say that I'm going to do this here and don't back up on your word. You know, and take input from the mothers. You know. And the beer thing, when we started, the beer truck was always ahead. You couldn't run up to that beer truck and just get a beer. And you couldn't go get 4 or 5 beers. You got you 1 or 2 beers, what you could drink. And there's going to be some wasted, because on a horse you ain't going to be able to drink a beer too good. And when I never bought no wine. We didn't buy wine prior to that. Now each person could bring them a bottle of wine. I personally, when I was drinking, I would put a jug of wine on my saddle. One of them big gallon jugs or half gallon with the hole in it. I'd tie me a string through it and hand it to the plumber of my saddle. And me and different guys rotated. 4 or 5 guys would buy some. Yeah.
Let's see here. I know there was something else that I wanted to ask you, and it's
I hope I'm doing what you asked.
blank. No. Yeah, it's. Oh, can you tell me the history, or if you know it, the history of the couple running?
The what?
The black couple, the black man and the black woman.
That was just a tradition that went from way back before we started.
They would just put.
Well, what we did,
black-faced.
what we did for the black, to make the fascia black, we'd use smut out of a fireplace. We took smut out of a fireplace and we mixed it with Vaseline. Then you'd put some Vaseline on your face, then you'd put the black smut. And you kept that smut, and you always had an extra jar to touch up during the day. Now that couple there, they should be paid to run Mardi Gras. Because they get the worst beating of their life. If they're constantly beaten all day. It's a lot of fun to beat a couple. But you got to work together. Because the other's always coming after your wife. And the husband's going to protect his wife. And I had a very bad wife because she had a pint of whiskey in the purse and slapped me in the and knocked me off of the horse with the pint of whiskey and broke the pint.
I don't know what's worse, getting hit with the pint or breaking it.
Most probably breaking it. That was worse because we didn't have no more.
Right. So tell me about your cape, what the colors mean on your cape.
I don't know really what the color means. All I know that's the color they had, purple and red.
And is one preferred over the other?
The red one was the one you had out all the time.
And the purple was used for like the purple, going through town or the dance that night?
No, you use the red all the time.
Oh, okay. Okay.
The red one was the one that stayed out from the beginning to the end.
Okay.
And we had the orange flag, and they had a grass sack whip.
What's the purpose of the whip?
The whip was more for fun, to whip the guys, put them in order, say, all right, you got to stay in line. That's what the whip was designed for. If they got out of line, you go whip them, put them back in line.
And it's just braided burlap sack.
It's a braided burlap sack. And you don't want it to get wet, because when it gets wet, it stings them. And it really hurts.
Right.
And it's not meant to whip people to hurt them. It's whip them to have a good time, get back in line. It's not to whip you and beat you.
Right.
It's just to keep order. And you're supposed to have a captain in the front with a whip. And you're supposed to have 2 captains in the middle on horseback. Then we always had 2 captains in the back with a whip. Then on the wagon you had 2 with a wagon. And the beer truck guy was always ahead. And even whenever we had the music on the wagon, you know, the guys would all ride the wagon, but they had a corner for the band to play.
So it was a live band that played for.
It played a live band for 5 years. They didn't have a big band. Now, it was a guitar, a fiddle, accordion. Then later on we had a guy that come and played the bass string. And I listed that on there. The bass string I didn't put because it rotated guys. You know, Nathan Ryder was the guitar player. Mr. Odie Ryder was the first one playing the accordion. And Mr. Tony Taylor played the fiddle. Then later on, when Mr. Ryder died, Mr. Swallow come in and played the accordion. And Tony's played the fiddle, Nathan played the guitar, and I don't remember who played the bass string, but he didn't play all day. It was off and on. And then later on, after Mr. Swallow died, and we started getting the music on the truck. And then they, like in 70, I would say around 78, they still had, 78, 79, they still had the guys playing on the thing, the music. I know Mr. Cotton Ryder played the accordion, and Nathan was playing the guitar, and I think at that time was either Mr. Delmer Sonnier played the fiddle. Yeah, but they weren't live all day. But they played there, and more when we got to a house, they played. Then it kind of faded out.
Well, I think we got a bunch of good stuff. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you may want to talk about?
The one thing that we always did, we called rope, and only 2 people had a knife on the ride. It was the front captain had a knife, and sometimes the back captain had a knife. And the knives were just to use if a saddle broke, or if you had to cut a girth off of a horse, something like that. But we made sure everybody emptied their pocket and told them to leave their knife at home. And I think the knife thing went back from where it got started.
Sounds good. Well, that's all I've got. So I appreciate you taking a little time and helping me out with this project. And
I don't have no problem. I hope I did you some good.
oh yeah, everything's good. There's no bad information. So
We had some Mexicans. One of them was called Poncho, and the other was Pancho Villa.
Grandson, Pancho Villa, grandson. Pancho Villa, grandson.